Actually, I lied. I made 2 albums. One is the thumbnail of this video. The other is a lot more interesting. Mondobi Games, compilation album of my video game music from 2017 to 2024. This album tells an intricate story about my relationship with music over the years, but not in chronological order. That would make for a very good album since all the best songs will be at the end, but we're going to start from the beginning, and that is... I had heard a lot of video game music before Super Smash Bros. Brawl, but I hadn't really listened to it. This game's music really stuck for me, and it was the first soundtrack I listened to outside of the game itself. That's probably because this soundtrack is a sampler of some of the best tunes video game music has to offer, and thanks to that I discovered the world of Nintendo music. I don't want to say I was that kid who only listened to video game soundtracks, but yeah, I was that kid. The accessibility, the diversity of genres, the catchy melodies, all of it drew me into this music. Around the same time, I also discovered a little indie game called Cave Story, another game with a top-notch soundtrack all composed by one guy, Pixel. And not only did he make all the music in Cave Story, he even made the program to compose the music and released it for free. Learning all this inspired me to download that program and make some songs of my own, inspired by the Nintendo music I was hooked on. The program is pretty limited. You only get 8 instruments and 8 drums, all your notes snap to the grid, there's no MP3 export, etc. But these limitations actually simplify things a lot, so that even I can make music. I started making my own songs inspired by what I heard in Cave Story and other games I was playing. They didn't sound very good. Even when I tried to remake other games' music, it didn't turn out well. But I didn't let that stop me. You see, at the time I started making games in Scratch, and like my music, they were pretty mediocre. A perfect match. Naturally, I had the idea to make music for my Scratch games using this program. So, in 2017, I wrote Stamina, an up-tempo theme for this arcade-style game, Changer Danger. The theme wasn't awful by itself, a little grating, sure, but nothing terrible. The difficulty came in transferring the song to Scratch. As I mentioned, this program doesn't have an MP3 export feature. It only got Wave Export this past May. But I was determined to get this track into the game. Luckily for me, Scratch lets you record sound directly from your microphone. So I clicked record, then turned my speaker volume up, tabbed over to the song, and hit play. The music was pretty muffled since the laptop was sitting on my bed, but my little hack worked. I even overdubbed some vocals onto it in real time.
1, 2, 3, 4.
When I released the game, I could have easily said, music made by me, but I decided to legitimize the operation by randomly generating a band name, Trivial Decadence, and giving them credit in the description. I would compose dozens of other tracks using this program, some embryonic, some more full-fledged, and Org Maker, as it's called, would leave an indelible mark in my musical journey. As I continued listening to my Nintendo music, YouTube would occasionally try and send other stuff my way, just random songs that I'd sometimes enjoy but usually just ignore. But one of these recommendations turned out to be spot on. Rolling Down the Street and by Katamari, by an artist named Fear of Dark. It was a lot more complex than the songs I'd been listening to, but it also felt fuller and more exciting. Of course, I was hooked immediately. Similar to Pixel, Fear of Dark made his music using freely available software, which gave it an independent feeling. Even though his songs were underground, relative to Mario and Kirby at least, they were just as good as the soundtracks from these world-famous Nintendo composers, if not better. But back to my game soundtracks. A little while after I discovered Fear of Dark, I was in the process of learning Unity, and I was almost done with my first small game, The Switcher, but it needed music. I was still mostly using Org Maker at the time, but I decided to give another software a try, Beatbox, which is popular on Scratch. Pleased with my results, I made another song for the levels. Later on, when I was updating the game post-release, I added another song for the level editor. This was made in GarageBand for iOS. I decided to reuse the melody of the title theme, which was the first evidence of my love of leitmotif. I would use this technique again in another project, a mobile game called Wing It. For this soundtrack, I was inspired by one of Fear of Dark's albums, The Coffee Zone, which was made up of tracks that could theoretically play in an NES game. Not only did they sound like Nintendo music, but they were actually compatible with the system itself. To do this, he used a software called FamiTracker. Since Wing It kind of looks like an NES game, I decided to give FamiTracker a try, and it worked out well. For my next larger game, Breezy, I experimented with another open source software called LMMS before switching to OpenMPT, which Fear of Dark used to make what are, in my opinion, his best songs. The first song I wrote from scratch in OpenMPT was Breezy's Halloween theme, which was, in my opinion, the best song I made up to that point. I also remade the older LMMS tracks in OpenMPT. As I learned the software, I became more and more confident in my abilities as a composer, but my skill at coming up with melodies and song structures was roughly stagnant. After all, I was listening to the same old Nintendo music. But that all changed when I was recommended a song on YouTube, Lunar Sea, released in 1976 by the band Camel. It's basically 2 guitar solos with a keyboard solo in the middle, bookended by some ambient sections, about 9 minutes in all. I kept listening to it until I finally decided to seek out more music from this band. That song started my journey of listening to Camel and progressive rock as a whole, bands like Pink Floyd, Yes, and ELP. The complex instrumentals and lengthy tracks felt like a natural extension of the Nintendo soundtracks and Fear of Dark tunes I had grown so fond of, even if the genre's heyday was decades before either of them. And of course, my own songs started sounding a lot more proggy. The most obvious example is the theme for The Moon, an unlockable course in Breezy. It's an up-tempo rocker in 5/4 time, the same time signature as the guitar solos in Lunar Sea, with guitar and keyboard samples in the forefront. About 6 months later, I made Ancient Pyramid, a slower song riddled with stereo effects and synths that wash over you. This kind of music combined prog and chiptune in a genre that I haven't found many examples of. I'll call it, how about prog chiptune? Right after finishing Breezy, I started a prototype for a 2D side-scrolling game called Deck Dojo. Of course, I needed some music for this prototype. The only problem, I wasn't writing the theme of a cryptic puzzle level or a final stage, just a regular old city. I needed something simple and memorable, so I wrote a regular rock song, something kind of Beatles-esque. It sounded good, a little bombastic, but I could tweak it if needed, so I wrote some more. Of course, a little prog influence snuck in, like when I sampled Pink Floyd's Animals in the Underground theme. My next prototype soundtrack, Sunema, was a better balance of complex instrumentation and a more subdued sound. There were still musical ideas building up in my brain, and worst of all, I was getting better at music. Normally this would be a good thing, but for example, Breezy took 2 years to make, and I got so much better at making music that the last song I made sounds infinitely better than the first. If I made another large-scale game, the quality of the music would be all over the place. So I made a plan. I would get all of these musical ideas out of my system and improve my workflow for the next game by making a full-on, standalone prog chiptune album. To be clear, this is the album I mentioned in the beginning that's a lot more interesting. Interesting in part because it's a documentary album that tracks my growth as an artist. I came up with a few rules to ensure this. Each track must be placed in the order of writing, and I can't make any major edits to a song I've already made. This way the album will be a view into my journey as a composer, with the best tracks being at the end. But wait, didn't I mention that this wouldn't make for a good album? Well, I did, and I would have to overcome this challenge through careful planning. Fortunately, the first song I made turned out, in my opinion, better than I could have hoped for. Its original purpose was to test out a new sample library I came across, so it focuses on the eerie sounding instruments. I ended up calling it the War Machine, since the minimalistic drum beat at the start almost recalls a military march. The next song, Cloudland Canyon, is a much more lush, orchestral sounding instrumental, and the third song, Neonomicon, goes full on hip hop. All three of these songs have some prog leanings, but they could just as well pass for video game music. The next song, though, is unmistakably prog, and similar to The War Machine, it was originally made as a test, this time for a new keyboard I got for Christmas. The song, which I call Resolve Luminary, is made up of a few distinct segments, each about a minute long. A solemn march, a hardcore thrasher, a swing tune, and finally a build-up before the final conclusion. The instrumentation is centered around an electric guitar, a Hammond organ, and a glockenspiel. Satisfied with this experiment, I was ready to get even crazier. How about a song with lyrics? This one is especially difficult for me, and I don't particularly know why. There are probably dozens of hours of me talking, publicly available on the internet, but modulating my vocal cords in a specific way is where it gets uncomfortable. Regardless, it's not like anyone else is going to do it, and with a few dozen tries I can sound like a pretty decent vocalist. Also, my lyrics tend to be few and far between, so I don't have to record too many takes. Which brings us to the song itself, Tell Me, which starts out sounding Santana-esque before taking a left turn into space rock. The lyrics are, well, they're pretty vague. The word love is in there once, so I won't be too mad if you compartmentalize it as a love song, but it's a bit deeper than that. Anyway, at the time of writing this video, I haven't finalized the vocals yet, but they should be complete sometime soon. And yes, I remember my self-imposed rule that I can't make major changes to a song after I'm done. However, I planned for these vocals to be in the song from the start, so I wouldn't call it a major edit. But speaking of my constraints, we've had 3 4-minute songs, followed by a couple of 6-minute songs, and spoiler alert, the rest are going to be even longer. We need a break, so I whipped up a 2-minute interlude. Definitely the calmest song on the album to smooth out the pacing, and it's a good thing I did because the next song is crazy. I call it Motive Power, and it's kind of an evolution of the Moon theme in Breezy. Both songs are fast-paced in 5/4 time with guitar and keyboards in the spotlight, but Motive Power is even faster, even more frenetic, and much longer at roughly 9 minutes. How do you go about making a 9-minute song? Well, for me, it started with this beat in the intro, which took some time to get right. From there, most of the song consists of various solos, 10 of them in fact, depending on how you count. As with Tell Me, the lyrical sections are fairly short, although there are more of them. On 2 occasions, the 5/4 beat gives way to a pulsing 4/4 segment that changes the tone of the song somewhat, but sandwiched between those is an instrumental segment that might be my favorite moment on the album. But speaking of the album itself, this thing's nearing completion, so what do we call it? Well, I had actually decided on a name about halfway through the album's production, Shepard Tones. It's a pun on Shepard tones, a type of audio illusion that sounds like a tone going upward forever. Think of the endless stair music from Mario 64. To me, Shepard tones represent the fact that change is constant, and although the world seems to be changing non-stop, the important parts stay roughly the same in the end. Plenty of the songs in this album explore the idea of constants. The War Machine with endless militarism, Cloudland Canyon with the beauty of nature, I could go on. And just like sheep returning to their shepherd, this idea of change giving way to constants is comforting, at least for me. So, Shepard Tones. The name lends itself well to some visual wordplay on the album cover. Notice how the sheep loop back around like a barber pole. It also lends itself to the title track, a 13-minute-ish song to close out the album. Drawing from prog rock epics like King Crimson Starless or Pink Floyd's Shine On You Crazy Diamond, it's divided into 3 parts. The first part is an instrumental intro in 7/4 time based on an actual Shepard tone. The second part is a simpler R&B-esque section, and the only one with lyrics. The third part is a return to the chiptune instrumentation of The War Machine, expanding on its themes and bringing us back to the beginning. As of writing, the song is only about halfway done, bringing us up to now. Making this album has been an immensely enjoyable process, and it's only enhanced my enjoyment for making music, along with my appreciation for my older songs and the journey I've taken, which finally leads us to that other album. Of course, I've made a few smaller compilations of my music before. Last year when I was working on Deck Dojo and the Breezy relaunch, I posted some short 3-song collections. I also made a larger video at the end of the year called Music I Made This Year, but it was pretty low effort. I didn't even bother to loop most of the songs, I just let them abruptly stop. This time I wanted to celebrate my game music with a truly high quality compilation. I thought about just releasing the full soundtrack to Breezy, but I haven't finished all the music for the post-launch updates. So instead, I started brainstorming an album-length collection of my game music from all eras. Even though I wasn't composing any new music per se, I still thought hard about mastering and sequencing. I tried to stagger the more complex or intense songs with interludes from my earlier, shorter tracks to keep the pacing bearable. I also added a seamless loop and fade out to most songs and inserted some silence between tracks. Finally, I made a short remix of the theme from The Switcher, remember the first song I made for a Unity game, to transition into the Grass Course theme from Breezy. Luckily, this whole process didn't take too long, so it was a fun break from working on Shepard tones. It doesn't have to be a music album. It can be a collection, a portfolio, whatever. But if you're a creative person, you need to appreciate your past work. It might also give you newfound respect for your earlier influences, like me with my Nintendo music. It can give you some newfound perspective on what makes you different as an artist, and it's just plain fun. Finally, it's good to preserve your earlier works for other people to look back on, even if you don't think they're anything special. And listen, I know this part of the video is pretty short for being half the title, but seeing my journey should make it pretty clear why making an album is a great idea. As I mentioned, Mondobi Games is already out. You can listen to it on all the major streaming platforms. As for Shepard tones, it'll be out within the next few months. I may release the first single in a few weeks depending on which song I pick for it. If you like talking video game music or video games, join my Discord. Also another end of video update for my hardcore fans. I've decided to split up the Breezy relaunch into 2 smaller updates. The first one, which I'm calling Around the World, will have the 2 new courses, the Ancient Pyramid and the Special Shrine. The second one will have the multiplayer. I've decided to do this so I can get the content out as quickly as possible, and so I can use 2 update visibility rounds instead of just 1. I don't really know what my next video will be since I'm preparing to move back up to college next month, but we'll figure it out. Have a good day.